For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out with the crowd. Buy me some peanuts and Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back. Let me root for the home team. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game.
Welcome to Let's Get To, the baseball podcast from the fans' perspective. Now here's your host, James Christopher.
And welcome to Let's Get To. I am your host, James Christopher, and I am hanging out with some of my friends. I was thinking about some of the stuff that I missed the most about not being at a baseball game live this year. And look, I know that I'm 44, going on 45, and we'll get there so much closer than maybe I want to. But one of the things I missed the most are mascots. I love a mascot. When I see a mascot, I turn into a 3-year-old, and I sometimes will bring either the grandson or my soon-to-be nephew, Duncan, to meet Swatson or to see the pickle or see Dylan the pickle. And it's for him, but it's for me. So I love mascots, and I have a couple of my favorites out here. First of all, I contend that Orbit is the best mascot in professional baseball. I know that's not the traditional choice. I know the Philly Fanatic is the one who really got it going, and I was always a big fan of the San Diego Chicken. But I think Orbit has really cultivated a personality of being a little sarcastic. My favorite GIF? It should be GIF, but we say GIF. That's the downfall of America right there. But, is him on a winning streak. I share it when the Astros have a winning streak. It's him streaking, and he's like running in his underwear across Minute Maid Park. And at one point he stops and celebrates like he avoided security, that, not the security's coming after Orbit. But I've got a couple of others. I've got the one from the Harrisburg Senators. I've got Mama Pino, which is the Ballapino's mother for the San Antonio Flying Chanclas. And then the Senators, and then Gigante and the Wilmington Blue Rocks. And then we have an Orbit here from the moon landing, which was something really cool that minor league baseball celebrated last year. Was the 50th anniversary of landing on the moon. So just really, really cool stuff, really fun stuff. And I was really thinking about all of this tied into the shirt that I'm wearing. So the shirt that I'm wearing is the minor league baseball logo, and the logo is made up of the name of all current 160 teams. But as soon as I got this and I got another MiLB logo tee, I realized that this shirt is an artifact. The writing is on the wall, ironically enough, because it's on the shirt, but it's an artifact. The fact is that these 160 teams that are represented on the shirt, not all of them are going to exist in the same form or fashion, and not all of them are going to be the same organization. And the organization MiLB with this logo, which I think is vastly superior to the MLB logo, will maybe not be a thing anymore. And that could not be a thing anymore in as soon as 20-something days. So it's really a sad place to be. And, it just kind of bummed me out when I was thinking about mascots. I was thinking about all the great mascots that are representing teams that have not stopped working, that are still going to hospitals, and they're still going to communities, and they're still trying to do their best to do what they can do to help communities out in the time of COVID. And they could be unceremoniously put out to pasture. So that is, a sad realization, a sad fact, as I just started walking down the road of, oh, I miss seeing Orbit at games. Oh, I'm wearing this shirt. I now know what the opening monologue of the episode will be. But we do have a great episode for you. Scott and Andy are here. We're going to do another joint session like we did before the season started, just to see where we are with less than 20 games left for most of the teams. We're going to see where we are with the season going forward. what surprises us, what doesn't, and what we think is going to happen. Andrew Nelson is here for our Raiders of the Lost Diamond. We're going to talk about a team that used to play in Duluth with one of the best hats you've ever seen. So stay with us.
Holler and a Swaller, a chug of Ballpark brew. Presented by The Hitter Sports.
And so we are back here on Holler and a Swaller, presented by The Hitter Sports. Make sure you follow The Hitter Sports on Twitter for all your fun and he's a little fired up about the Yankees right now, but great follow on Twitter. Definitely check him out. But we're not going to stop this segment. Now, the idea of the segment was discovering new and local beer that we find at the ballpark and helping people learn about it. Because look, when I go to a ballpark, I'm not going to drink. I will drink a Diet Dr. Pepper before I drink a Bud Light. I'm like that. But if there's something new, if there's something local that I've never tried, well, I'm going to give that a shot. Well, and I thought, just because the baseball season's over, the season for the show isn't, and we're going to continue to find new beer and share it with you. And we're going to try to find it, obviously, a lot of ATX stuff. Look, Austin's got a great beer community. We're going to do our best to shine our light on some of the breweries maybe you haven't heard of from Austin, but also from all over the country. We've got a lot of great liquor stores here where I'll be able to find a lot of fun stuff. So we're going to start today with Friends and Allies Brewing in Austin, Texas. They have a Sportsball Pilsner with "You're Killing Me, Smalls" written on the can. Obviously, it is it fits right into the mission of this show to talk about baseball. Now, before we dive into the beer, I do want to point out that we have got one in the Martha's Vineyard Cozy, which those guys sent to me. Super cool. I'm very excited about it. But now let's give the beer a shot. But before we do, a first ever on Let's Get To. It's our attempt at, I think the kids call it ASMR. Is that a thing where we... Now, first of all, is there a better sound than that? The only thing better than that is as soon as I open it, I hear the crack of a bat. And then either George Springer colliding with the wall to catch it, or George Springer hitting it off the community leader sign at Minute Maid Park. Those are the only things that could be better. But no, we love the can. Sounds great. So we can't wait to give this thing a try. Holler and a Swaller, baby. Oh, that's very good. Oh, that's very, very good. It's very light. It's crisp. This is the perfect sitting outside drinking beer. This is great. This is really, really good. And I do want to point out, for the first time in several Hollers in the Swaller, I didn't pour it down the wrong pipe, which happened twice, and I didn't accidentally grab the can from the wrong end and have to do this awkward thing. So the streak is broken.
Go Go Astros, a focus on H-Town hardball. And now, the Big League Chew, an eye on the majors. Brought to you by Zoomer Sport.
And we are back here on Let's Get To with, it's now the Three Musketeers. We are back. We have Andy Tomchesson from GO Astros and Scott McIntyre from the Big League Chew to talk about a season that, while it just began, it's already almost over. It's like the first time I made love. How are you guys doing?
Well, hopefully it's not quite that painful, but for Astros fans at least, it absolutely is.
Well, if you're a Cardinals fan, there's still a lot to the season still remaining. So
the Cardinals
are still trying to get caught up.
They're playing 73 games in the next 2 weeks. Is that what's happening?
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, we're playing 3 games a day.
Yeah,
beginning at 6 a.m. So, but we're gonna get there.
We're gonna get there. Those
so
4
they moved you to the KBO.
We took. So here's in what season do the Cardinals? So the Cardinals have played 35 games at this point. They had played 33 games in total before yesterday, before the double hitter on last Tuesday. Anyway, when they had played 33 games, 28 of those games, 15 had been at home and 13 had been in Chicago. We played the Cubs 10 times all year, and every time was at Wrigley. Throw in 3 games for the White Sox. We've played as many games in Chicago as St. Louis.
Well, it's like Andy and I are big Oakland Astros fans. I don't know.
Yeah, there you go.
favorite home venue is Oakland Alameda Stadium.
Yeah, you got to love it. Andy, overall, though, what have your impressions of the season been? You know, we're recording this a little bit before the episode drops. The Astros and Yankees have about the same record, which I think everybody expected. Just didn't expect it that they're
Hey, the Astros are a half game ahead of the Yankees. Thank you very much.
You're very well. You're very right.
This is why we play 162 games. I think everything you're seeing right now is why the regular Major League Baseball season is as long as it is, because over time, talent's going to win out. But in a compacted season, something 60 games, or if you're in St. Louis, 32 games,
14.
You're going to have teams that get hot for short periods of time and other teams who have injuries at the wrong time, and it's going to really skew things. The Astros have bullpen problems. I'm not making any excuses for them. Their offense has been woefully inconsistent. But if they had a 22-21 stretch in the middle of a regular season, you might not notice it. You might be a little concerned about it, but it might not be the end of the world like it is right now. If you're the Yankees and you've had all of your starting lineup basically spend time on the IL in the last couple of weeks, and I know our friends before the pitch are feeling that pain, or at least one of them is, you're going to have a season like this, and you've got the Rays who've taken advantage and the A's who've taken advantage because they've been hot and managed to not get injured. That's what we're going to see this year. My other impression of Major League Baseball right now is the Dodgers are 900 levels better than every other team in Major League
Every
Baseball.
other team, yeah.
And we're going to get to play them.
And we'll still find a way to not win the World Series. Has anyone, in all seriousness though, the Yankees are half game ahead of Baltimore for the last playoff spot in the AL. If Baltimore takes them and Yankees don't make the playoffs, do we have forces prepared to put Scotty from before the pitch on suicide watch?
I know that Jessica was legit worried about them when they were playing the Mets. She's like, I don't know, like, do we check in on them? How are they doing? I actually wanted to bring that up. I think we'll go there then. You said it. Yankees or half game out. I'm going to channel my inner Tom Chesson. At what point does MLB announce we're shutting down for COVID?
Oh, absolutely. I was just about to say there is no way that they won't just cancel the season immediately.
Or we expand it to 18 teams.
There you go. No, I mean, I think so. You know, you're talking about what's happening this season. We touched on it on the last show. I saw that Andy agreed with me in that, or I agreed with him, whichever way, that the 8-team playoff in each side will probably be something to stay. So even though there's 162 games, the more you expand the size of the playoffs, the less the length of the season really matters, because it's this frenetic race there at the end. And I think we're getting the taste for that. You know, even though some of it feels kind of like, we're only playing 60 games this year. I still think that next year and years to come, if they maintain 16 postseason teams, there's going to be this craziness in the last month of the season. We better get used to it in September, with a whole lot of teams still playing for a berth in October. So I think this is kind of a sign of things to come, really, despite that we have the short season. And who would have thought that Toronto would be over the Yankees in any shortened season, in any September ever in the history of mankind? Even Joe Carter's like, what? So,
I'm a big believer in the Buffalo Fighting Bigios. I don't know about you guys, but I'm a big believer in them.
And I don't want to just focus on the American League, but I think the difference is not necessarily the field of participants in a 16-game playoff, but the seedings of those teams. Because if you look back at our predictions, and I think we're pretty smart people, Astros, Twins, and Yankees were, I think, unanimously picked to win the 3 divisions of the American League, and they're 6, 7, and 8 right now.
Yeah.
I think I had Tampa. I may have had Tampa. I know I had Tampa doing.
You had Tampa, but you're
in the end.
I know you were telling me how great the Angels were going to be, and even
I thought you said we're not talking about the American League. I thought you said we're not talking about the American League. How am I supposed to know that nobody can pitch in Anaheim? Okay, how was I supposed to know?
I literally said they have no pitching.
But it's one thing to have no pitching at the major league level. It's another thing to be pitching and people go, holy shit, our single A team's out here pitching. What's going on with this? I mean, no, they literally, I mean, there's no, but there, well, Yeah, but it's only because you guys are injured. This is the cream of their crop.
Yeah.
There's no way that Joe Madden looks at the Angels and goes, I wonder what's wrong with our team. You can't throw the freaking ball. That's the problem, Joe. It's very simple.
When Justin and I were driving back from our little anniversary thing, she said, man, I hope we don't get swept by a team with no pitching. And I kind of looked at her and she goes, well, that's what Andy said. So look at you, Andy, you're an influencer.
That's great. Maybe I can have 200 followers on Twitter instead of 100.
Follow Andy Tom Chesson at Andy Zip. All right, so Scott, what about this year though has really surprised you, and has it been a fun year for you so far?
I think it's been after the 16-day break of the Cardinals not playing with me going, oh, gee, the Blues are getting knocked out of the playoffs and there's no baseball. So I'm going to go hang myself from a tree. After we got past that, we have gotten to the point where it's a blast. I think it's an absolute blast. The Marlins have a ton of good young pitching. Jeter is establishing something down there. It's really fun to watch. It's also fun that there's going to be 8 playoff teams in each division. I keep coming back to that, but that does make it fun. You know, the more people you can invite to the party, the better, as long as we don't invite the really bad teams, because we don't want to see them.
I do want to say on that, though, I do think that Manfred actually was smart in that. And I was a little irritated about it. I was irritated about it mostly because, to Andy's point, I really thought the teams that would be hurt by this would have been the Astros and the Yankees and the Dodgers, because you allow some upstart in. Now it turns out it's actually allowing, at least with the Yankees and the Astros cases, probably the more talented teams, the ability to override these things, because you get into a three-game series in a neutral site. It's really going to be about talent. It's not going to be about, I think the home field advantage is a big deal this year, and it won't be about that.
It's 2 hot pitching performances, and the Marlins have 2 good starters. So that's the crazy part, right? You could get to that point where you have a 2 out of 3 game series, and you have 2 hot starters, and suddenly the number 8 Marlins have just knocked out the number 1 Dodgers, and Dodger fan is lamenting everything in the world and screaming and saying, well, we need to make this a double elimination playoff, and the Yankees will probably agree. So to me, that's exciting. I love that. I love that the Tigers still have a chance to make the playoffs. I think the American League Central as a whole has been quite surprising. Cleveland has silently and quietly gone to tie the division lead over there, despite offseason losses, despite Mike Clevenger going away, despite the internal team strife. You want to talk about a team, and no pun intended, that they've circled the wagons well. It has been Cleveland. They have done an amazing job to really say, we're going to close things off. We're going to protect ourselves, and we're going to get through this. They've done a great job. I wear the Cardinals gear all the time, but I'm going to say that I think Mike Schilt has done an amazing job juggling things around with the Cardinals to be a game above 500. Yeah. You lost. There were 27 games in 23 days. That's incredible. I shared a stat with you from the past weekend too, Jim, that we had 20 games taking place in the same day. That was more since like 1974. Yeah. So to me, we're playing a lot of baseball under changing rules and regulations, and guys like Kevin Cash and Mike Schilt and the like are really getting through it while not having individual performances that elevate them.
Andy, Scott mentioned a couple of young managers that have adapted well to this. The Astros have anything but a young manager, and I don't want to get too much into this, but how do you think Dusty has done in this particular scenario with the hand that he's been dealt?
Well, first of all, you could take 3 of those young managers, add them together, and you still wouldn't have one Dusty Baker level of experience. Dusty is what we thought he was. I will say, trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, I think he's been dealt a crappy hand, because the team he thought he had is not the team he has, and that's just what this year is. But I think an effective manager doesn't do what he's doing to the bullpen, doesn't let guys go 9 days without pitching and let some other guys pitch 9 days in a row. regardless of effectiveness, and that's been one of Dusty's issues, is that he has always been bad at managing bullpens. He's had much better bullpens, and so it's hidden some of that, but he is notorious for riding the hot hand on a young arm until it doesn't give you anything anymore, and using guys in really weird situations, and we've seen that all season long. The offense has come and gone for the Astros, and I think that's a lot about the relative health of your main players. But our record is what it is in spite of Dusty, not because of Dusty. So, I would be –
the days of playing a hunch are gone, right? Right, Andy? You can't do that nowadays.
I don't want to say that's true, because I think we had a manager, and every manager that we have for the next decade is going to pale in comparison to the one who won the World Series for us. So A.J. Hinch was very, very, very good, and he will be very good in New York next year or wherever he ends up landing. Once
as he writes Springer's name into the leadoff spot.
Yeah, it's going to be super difficult to watch that. But Dusty isn't that guy. But Hinch played hunches all the time. He just had reasons for playing those hunches. Dusty plays hunches because I had eggs this morning, and your last name has a G in it, so you're going to
had eggs this morning, and that's what Hank Aaron said I should do. Which Hank Aaron comes up more.
By the way, I went to a club with Hank Aaron once. Let me tell you about that.
Scott, did you have something you wanted to add to that?
That's really the equivalent of saying, well, back in my day. I think that if you're playing to the point, and that's what I was trying to say, Andy's right. If you're playing a hunch because you have data behind it or because you have a grand scheme, that's one thing. I will admit I have not watched that many Astros games. The 2 or 3 that I've watched have literally, I've turned my hat sideways and been like, WTF, man, what is going on here?
Yeah.
The other day I even texted you guys when I'm watching a pitcher that had given up 5 runs through 7 innings be called back out for the 8th inning. And I'm going, what?
Right.
And trying to save the bullpen, yet he couldn't get an out in that inning. So instead he made the game worse. And it was a tight game going into that. People that have watched, I think this is why Washington fans got nuts over dealing with Dusty. Like, he's a good guy. We like the guy. We understand why he's there. But, you get in your own way, Dusty. Get out of your way.
I do think there's a chance he retires after this season. He looks like this is no fun. And I do feel like and I'll get one more thought from Andy on this, but I think the frustrating thing for me is if the bullpen really is young and you really don't know who they are, and I believe all of those things are true, despite what that douche Dan Clark Sports says. Anyway, but the fact is you got to throw them then. And I think giving a rookie reliever – I every time he plays the matchup, I think about Billy Beane as Brad Pitt as Billy Beane. I don't care about righty-lefty. Righty-lefty. Give these guys clean innings and let them pitch until they can't pitch anymore and figure out what they can do. But this trying to play matchup with guys when nowadays most guys have good reverse splits anyway. I don't know, Andy, final thought on that?
It's frustrating. Would you like to have Brad Peacock and Will Harris and a healthy Joe Smith or a non-opted out Joe Smith and Devo from pre-2018? Yes, that would be great. I think the guys in the bullpen, for the most part, have done as well as they can. I think one of the keys that Dusty refuses to look at is something you just said, putting them in positions to succeed, which I think is one of the things Hinch was really, really good at. You start off a young guy with a clean inning. You give a guy experience when there is a lead, and you test them going from that point. You don't throw them into the fire of, hey, bases loaded, nobody out. Let's call you up from Fayetteville and see what you can do today, right now. Go. Warmed up, don't care. Yeah. I didn't warm up in 1957 when I faced blah, 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 blah.
Well, I do think that's a good point, though. I think last night Chase DeYoung actually had a really good start, and he made it through the lineup, I think, twice. You're playing a 7-inning doubleheader. You're planning on it being a bullpen game anyway. Pat him on the butt and say, you went from Constellation Field to this, and you shut out that team. Move on. So a couple of things as we face this week coming up, and I kind of wanted your thoughts. And Scott, we'll go to you first, but I do want to hear from Andy on this. We had Darian Sills Evans on last week talking about Tom Seaver, and one of the players he faced the most was Lou Brock. Lou Brock, I'm only familiar with, obviously, retrospectively, because he was one of Biggio's favorite players, and so that made me go look him up. Tell me a little bit about what losing Lou Brock means to the St. Louis Cardinal community.
Lou Brock was, first of all, he's amazing as a player, but as a former player, I think he was even more amazing. His involvement around the clubhouse, his involvement with the team, even after losing a leg to diabetes a few years ago, he would still make appearances with the team. It's a huge loss, you know. To say you've lost an 81-year-old person and that's a loss, it's not like losing someone at a very young age. Yeah, it still is. It's just a leadership. This is a guy who would come into the clubhouse for the Cardinals or show up at spring training and would know people by name. Cardinals announcer Brad Thompson has even said, he walked up and put his hand on his back and go, "Hey, Mr. Thompson, how you doing?" And Brad Thompson was like, "Oh my God, he knows my name." Well, and then realized later, I have my name on the back of my jersey. So, but Lou had a way of doing that with people that I think was amazing. We have to look back at Lou as a player as well. Lou as a player was one of 4 people to ever put a ball in the center field bleachers at the old Polo Grounds. Now, what does that mean? It's 450 feet just to the fence at the old Polo Grounds. When you see Willie Mays making the catch behind his back, he's 444 feet away from home plate, which makes that catch all the more interesting. But only 4 people ever put a ball there. Lou Brock was also one of the first players that went the college route. He was born in El Dorado, Arkansas. He went to Southern University and then found his way up through the ranks of the Cubs organization. And when he was traded in '65 for Ernie Broglio, who had been Cy Young candidate the year before, that trade, the Cardinals were ripped throughout newspapers for that trade because you made such a stupid trade. Well, Broglio retired a couple of years later, and Lou Brock went on to steal 938 bases, revolutionizing the way that the base was stolen. Maury Wills would take the long lead. Lou Brock didn't. He took a short lead and read pitchers. He had an 8mm camera in the dugout studying pitchers long before anybody else did. Brilliant guy.
What?
Were there trash cans?
Were there trash cans saying, "Go, Lou, go"?
You can't watch it live on 8mm, guys. You can't watch that.
Hey, we are just triggered by the word.
He's watching it later.
You said cameras and dugout. We can't do that in 2020.
We're triggered.
Well, no, but you could with an 8mm. You can still use an 8mm in the dugout.
Probably like, what the hell is that thing?
They would bang on the trash can to tell Lou when to take off running.
I did before I want to get Andy's thoughts on Lou before we move to the next topic. But one of the things that I thought was, I found myself watching the Mets game the other day, and Keith Hernandez, who body shiver, but was showing that Lou Brock photobombed his very first Topps photo shoot for his very first baseball card. And Topps sent the photo to the Mets thing, and they put it up, and it was hilarious. Andy, any thoughts on losing either Lou Brock or Tom Seaver?
For Lou Brock, and this is, again, everything through the scope of being growing up an Astros fan, the Cardinals were the organization when you're a Houston Astro and playing in the Astrodome that you want to be. You want to have guys with blazing speed that steal a lot of bases, that are super great defensively, that cover huge amounts of ground, that do backflips, coming on to the opening day of shortstop Ozzie Smith. And I got to see Mr. Brock probably the last 4 years of his career, because I think he retired in '79. Come to the Astrodome, and it's just, that's what you wanted baseball to be when you're a little kid, because he was a guy not dissimilar to a lot of Cardinals players from that era that looked like they are having fun, they're playing the game the right way. And it's you had Wills, and that kind of led to Ozzie Smith, which kind of led to Willis McGee. There were just some great players that embodied what you wanted baseball to be before it became, let's see how far I can hit a home run.
I do think it's interesting, the Astros-Cardinal connection, because Houston had been a farm club for the Cardinals for so long that I do think there was a certain affinity, the Buffs and all that stuff. Next topic, and we'll tear through these last two quickly, but there's been a push and movement to essentially honor Roberto Clemente the same way they honor Jackie Robinson, having players. I think this week all the Astros associated with Puerto Rico, the Puerto Rican Astros players, all wore 21. I'm in favor of that. I don't know where you guys fall on. I mean, it seems like you can't not honor too many people like that, I think. Scott?
Yeah, I mean, Clemente is, I think, there's a reason that the Humanitarian of the Year award is named after him. There's a reason that so many players look up to him, even though he's somebody who hasn't been in baseball since 1972 when he tragically died in the offseason. By the way, providing humanitarian aid after, I think, a hurricane.
Yeah.
He's one of the pillars. If you were building a true Mount Rushmore of what baseball has been, especially since 1900, I think he's somebody you have to talk about being up there. And I don't think he gets near the credit he deserves for being the player that he was. He's a 15-time All-Star. He's a guy that counting stats, longevity stats. I mean, he had everything you'd want to be, and on top of being a great guy. He was a Marine, for God's sake, or at least Marine Reserve.
Right.
I think the most interesting thing about him is he was a Dodgers farmhand in Montreal, and the Dodgers spent a long amount of time, a good part of a season, trying to hide him from the rest of baseball because of the way the rules worked at that point. He was an unprotected player in the Dodgers system. And so they would have him warm up. They would have him take batting practice with the pitchers so scouts from other teams wouldn't see him.
I love that. Scott, any thoughts on Roberto Clemente?
With Yadier Molina behind the plate in St. Louis, who is a pillar of the I would think of the Puerto Rican community and a proud representative of his Puerto Rican roots. Absolutely, there is no reason in the world to not put Clemente's number right there with Jackie Robinson. I think, for similar yet different reasons. I think that what Clemente brought to the game was bigger than the game itself.
Yeah.
And what he brought to the Caribbean, we've seen a lot of. We've reaped what he sowed.
I think it's one thing I love about baseball is Roberto Clemente is one of my favorite players of all time, and I was not born before he died. But yet that's how the game, I think, passes its legacy on. Speaking of legacy, I feel like the last time baseball had a truly high moment was in the days and games after 9/11. Surprisingly enough, you guys, we are at almost 20 years since that event. What do you think baseball means to the country when it comes to events like that? I've told my 9/11 story already on the show, but I wanted you guys to share some thoughts just on that. I
think in 2001, that might have been the closest I've ever gotten to rooting for the Yankees in anything. And no offense, Scotty, but baseball was a sign that we could get back to normal and have things to celebrate. And people who normally would not be paying attention to baseball really wanted baseball to happen, really emotionally involved when those first games were played in Yankee Stadium and in Shea Stadium at that point. It was Shea, after 9/11. And it's something that I think baseball at its best has the power to unify, more so than the NFL, more so than the NBA, more so than the NHL, because it is a game that is timeless. It is not a game that is about attacking. It is still the game where the defense holds the ball and there's a lot of strategy and talking and everything we love about baseball. That's what makes it easy to bring people together. Football's divisive. You don't get together and love somebody else who roots for a different football team. You can admire and love fans from another baseball team, I think, a lot easier. The sad part of that is I don't know in 2020 if that's still true. And I think we talked about this on the show before. Baseball had a big opportunity to be kind of that unifying force this summer, and instead pissed it away by having a mini labor dispute prior to bequeathing us 60 games. And the 60 games are fun, and some people are really into it, and it's great that they expanded the playoffs for some people. It's not so great that they put a runner on second, but I mean, they've tried to make things work. But I think they've cashed in whatever cachet they've had, and it's just not enough anymore. And I don't know that this version of Major League Baseball is ever going to be able to get back to that. And I hope I'm wrong, but that's kind of where I am on September 11th, 2020. Scott?
It's almost like the last season of Brockmire was like really seeing into the future for how what was going to become of baseball. No, I think from 9/11, it did show that there's a unifying event, and I do believe that's really what it takes. In times of America's been disjointed before, and it takes tragic events like that where we have a enemy that we can point at that unifies us. So I haven't given up hope in that regard. I think baseball was definitely a unifying force at the time. The Subway Series, the teams themselves were good at the time as well, so that everybody kind of came around New York. For me, it was a different experience because I was overseas looking in, so I kind of had I was an insider who was outside looking in. You know what I mean? It was a very different experience for me, for sure. I think that we have to pay. What am I trying to say? We have to pay homage to what happened then. Baseball has a place to be. They have an opportunity. Baseball has an opportunity to capitalize on remembering itself and how it treated things correctly on 9/11, and we can do that again. And I really hope that Rob Manfred and company do that. And on a lighter note, to go back to something we just talked about a moment ago, if you guys are tired of Dusty Baker, Art Howe recovered from COVID and he's available. So just throwing it out there.
I'd take him in a heartbeat over Dusty Baker.
Thing I wanted to add.
All right, guys, everybody have a great rest of your day, and may the playoff odds be forever in your favor. Ballpark and Chill, the best in binge-worthy baseball podcasts. So we're joined again on our Ballpark and Chill segment, our dedication to other baseball shows. It's appropriate, Rob. We've got Thunder coming in. What better time to sit down and listen to both of your shows? But Rob Fontenot of the Astros Baseball Podcast and of Sunday Stros. How's it going, man?
Pretty good. Just got home. I had to take the day off to take the wife to the doctor. But, she's resting up. I'm in here talking to you about baseball. Life could be better, but this is pretty good.
This is pretty good. It's 2020, but at least we had some baseball to talk about, as weird as it's been. Tell me a little bit about you, though, your history with the game. How long have you been an Astros fan, and how long have you been doing the show?
Well, I've liked baseball my whole life. I grew up in Oklahoma, actually, so I was a Braves fan because they were always on TV. And I moved to Texas in '89.
Okay.
And then I was living in Seguin, which is 2 hours away from Houston. And I actually went to the game to see the Cubs. And I think this was in '96, maybe '97. But I enjoyed the game so much that I went back. Uh-huh. And then by the second or third game, I was an Astros fan. So I've been a fan ever since. And then the podcast, the way that happened was these guys at work were talking about it. Like, hey, let's start a podcast. They weren't talking to me about it, but they were talking.
Right.
And I just happened to see an app to make a podcast. And so I just said, hey, I'm going to try this out. And then when I get to work, I'll let them know, how to do it or see what it's about. Just tell them about the app. And so while I was sitting there, okay, well, what am I going to talk about? I have no idea what to talk about. And so I was like, okay, well, what do I love? What am I passionate about? And it was the Astros. And so, I was going to do like the entire sports or the entire baseball, but I just wanted to narrow it down to the Astros. So I got started like 2.5 years ago, I guess maybe a little bit more now. It was February before the 2018 season.
Okay.
And it just starts out like 5 people listening to it. And 2.5 years later, I'm still here.
Luckily, nothing eventful has happened since the 2017 World Series that maybe have made your show more interesting.
No.
Oh man. I actually do want to jump to that real quick because our show is very different than yours, which is why I think it's so cool that we can all have this medium. Ours is much more minor league focused and sort of culture of the game focused, but I end up being the guy that gets invited onto shows primarily in New York to explain how you can still be an Astros fan after they committed what Twitter tells me is the greatest sin in the history of humanity. How can you still be an Astros fan after they committed the greatest sin in the history of humanity? Tongue planted firmly in cheek, of course.
Well, my answer to that, if anyone asks me, is what do you expect me to do? Just stop liking them just because they cheated? Like, who am I supposed to be a Rangers fan? Am I supposed to just get MiLB package and like somebody else? I guess one option could be the Padres because they're the San Antonio Missions are the AAA team for them. But I mean, how do you stop liking them? If your kids do something wrong, you don't stop loving them, right?
I think the example that I made when asked about it, and actually it's very similar to yours because I'm a military veteran. So I said, listen, and I'm also Catholic. My church, my country, my wife, and my kids have all disappointed me. It doesn't mean I give up on them. I'm not giving up on these guys either. It's about the front of the jersey. And we could also dive into, things that Tony Adams has brought to light about how effective it all was anyway. But let's be honest, they want us to commit, Talk to me a little bit about your show, particularly the Astros Baseball Podcast. How's it different? How does it stand out from other content out there?
Well, I'm not really sure how it stands out, but what it is, it's just me, and I'm a fan. I'm not affiliated with a newspaper.
Right.
I'm not affiliated with a website. It's just a fan in this room right here where I'm at, making a podcast about a team that he loves. And I'm passionate about it. And I'm not political, meaning I don't have to say the right things. I mean, yeah. I can get into the cheating scandal and I will say things other Astro fans won't say because I can own up to what they did, but it doesn't make me not love them like we just talked about.
Yeah.
But that's, it's just, I love them. I'm passionate and I'm just a podcaster for the people. Whenever COVID came, I got all the guests I could get on, to give them something to listen to. I Googled baseball books in 2020 and I got like 3 people on that wrote baseball books. I got Greg Lucas, Bill Brown on here.
Nice.
So, I just, whatever I can do, I've had a couple of Astros players on. I actually, when I wasn't very good at it, I got a press pass to the Missions game when Round Rock was here. And I got to sit in the dugout and talk to Kyle Tucker, Miles Straw, Stubbs, and Forrest Whitley. But, I mean, they're horrible interviews. I was just fanboying it,
Right. But I think that comes through in a good way, though. I do think that's maybe what I like about it. It isn't you're not trying to be something that you're not, in the sense that I don't feel like I'm watching someone try to be ESPN. Like the fact that you love this team, warts and all, comes through. And I think that's really hard to do in this medium. And I think it's really refreshing.
Yeah, I don't sit here and, try to be a sportscaster. I'm just a fan talking into a microphone. And, like when I first started, I'm pretty much just telling you the results of the game and my thoughts of the game, give you the pitching matchups for the next series. And for a while I was thinking, why would anybody want to hear this? I mean, they could just, they watch the games. They can look it up on the computer.
Right.
But I got a lot of feedback. People like it. They're like, hey, I was out of town and I tune in on Sunday to your show and I catch up on everything that happened on the weekend series. So it just works for me.
Well, speaking of Sundays, you also partner for another show with a friend of ours that's been on our show a bunch. He goes by Stevie Proud on Twitter. Shout out to one of our favorite Astros UK fans. How did that show come about?
He was a guest on my show on a Sunday, and we enjoyed it. We had fun together. And then I said, hey, come back next Sunday, because because it's a lot funner to talk to somebody than it is to be by yourself.
Yeah.
And it also makes the podcast a lot longer because, you get into conversations with a fan. And so anyway, he came back the second time. And when I introduced him, I said, hey, this is Sunday Stros, because we did it 2 Sundays in a row. And I told him, hey, just keep coming back. This is fun. But he said, I want to start my own.
Okay.
So let's do our own together. So I said, okay, let's do it. So we came up with the logo. We made a promo video. I mean, we're putting all the effort into this Sunday Stros, way more effort than I put into Astros baseball, way more.
Right, right. I guess let's turn to the team then. We're going to hot link all the shows so everybody can find it. Been a very weird season. We actually had in the segment before this, our kind of our Astros-centered guy on our GO Astros segment give his thoughts. Overall, Rob, what are your thoughts on the job Dusty Baker has done so far this year?
It seems like he makes mistakes, like not taking pitchers out. I know he has a reputation for leaving them out there too long. Like an example would be Framber Valdez the other day.
Mm-hmm.
He had already thrown 100 pitches, but he threw them out there for the 8th inning. He gave up 3 hits and he took them out. He should have just taken them out. Even my wife knew. She's like, why is he going back in? He's already thrown 100 pitches.
Right.
And I know it was to protect the bullpen. And, sometimes he puts someone in there and you're kind of thinking, I guess he doesn't want to win this. And then sometimes with the batting order, some people don't understand why people like Correa, when they get hot, he doesn't move them up.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense. And I don't know, but I think he's doing the best he can with this bullpen.
It's a very weird season too. I guess as we close out, I mean, what do you forecast? I mean, do you feel like this is the team primed to when the playoffs do start? And I think the playoffs actually are going to be pretty advantageous to the Astros. I think basically playing in a bubble and not playing just a one game wild card, but a 3-game series might actually help them. What do you feel like the forecast for the Astros making the playoffs looks like when they get in?
Well, a few days ago, it looked like a cakewalk that we're going to be the number 2 seed in the West and possibly the number 1 seed, because when Oakland came to Houston, we put it on them.
Yeah.
But we can't win on the road, which is just weird because usually we're very good on the road. So this year is very different in that way. But if Verlander came back, I know Lance McCullers Jr., I don't have any faith in him at all, but he's injured. He's got the neck issue. If Verlander comes back, I know Bregman came back. We got injuries. If we're healthy, we can compete with anybody.
Raiders of the Lost Diamond, a look into baseball's past.
Today we're talking about the Duluth Superior Dukes. They're a team that is...
I put it all together from the hat, yeah.
My hat, yes. Yeah. They're a team that played in different iterations in Duluth, Minnesota for many years. Duluth is a picturesque town. It's certainly known for tourism nowadays, but it was traditionally a shipping and iron ore town back in the day. Iron ore and lumber shipped out of there. Still does to a certain extent, but not as much as it used to. And Superior is right across the river from Duluth in Wisconsin. So they're known as the Twin Ports collectively.
Everything's a twin with you people up there.
Yeah. we just like to get together, man.
I guess so.
So Duluth first had its professional baseball team, or had its first professional baseball team way back in 1886 when the Duluth Jayhawks played there as part of the Northwest League. They only played as the Jayhawks for one season and only in the Northwestern League for 2 seasons. And they had another distinctive name during the second season. They were the Freezers because it is fairly frigid up in Duluth. Even in the summer, it's a pretty mild climate. It's often in the 60s. Pretty nice day up there is in the 70s. I mean, it gets hot sometimes too, but it's known for being a little cool, for being kind of damp, lots of fog and rain and stuff because they're right there on the lake. Then they went without a team for a few years. In 1891, the St. Paul Apostles of the Western Association moved up to Duluth halfway through the season and became the Duluth Whalebacks, which is another great name. It comes from a distinctive type of freighter that was popularly used on the Great Lakes. And there is currently the world's only remaining whaleback freighter is a museum ship in Superior, Wisconsin. It's called the SS Meteor.
Okay.
So you can go visit that if you ever find yourself in the Duluth Superior area. In 1903, Duluth started its long association with the many iterations of the Northern League when the Cardinals came to town as part of the Class D Northern League. And they would field teams for the Northern League off and on up until 1970. Under various names, a lot of their history, they were the White Sox. But for a lot of the rest of it, they were the Dukes. They started playing as the Dukes in 1934. 1935. And played at Athletic Park, which they had opened back in 1903, until Wade Stadium was built in 1941. Wade Stadium has an interesting story of how it was built. It was a Works Project Administration building project. And it was spawned by another WPA project in Duluth where they were tearing up an old cobblestone street and repaving it. And they used all the paving stones for all the bricks from the street to make the main facade for Wade Stadium.
That's cool.
So it's got this classic brick look to it. And it's still there today. We'll get to more of that later. Unfortunately, the early Dukes weren't really known for much good other than their interesting ballpark story. The first iteration of the Dukes is most famous for the second worst bus crash in minor league history. In 1948, their team bus hit an oncoming truck head on just outside of St. Paul, and 4 members of the team and the bus driver died, and 13 other members were injured.
Wow!
And so they had to. They actually did complete their season. They had players shipped in from other minor league teams from the affiliate that they played for, and they were a Cardinals affiliate at the time, and from some other teams in the league. But yeah, it was a crazy tragedy. It was unfortunately what they were most known for. And then later on, their second iteration, which was from the late 50s until 1970. During the 60s, they were a Tigers affiliate, and they had a few notable Tigers players come through: Don Mincher, Willie Horton, and Denny McLean and Mickey Stanley. Mickey Stanley all played for them. Sorry, John Mincher was a White Sox great that also played for them. Also Joe Horner. So those two were in the late 50s. The other guys were in the early 60s and made up a pretty solid core of the Tigers in the 70s. Saw some success with them. So small city Duluth got to see some up and coming stars.
Yeah, that's the best part of all this thing that Manfred's trying to, as I told Jess Canaster this week, shoot in the face. But anyway,
right? Yeah,
that's not for this segment.
Yeah. So unfortunately, the old Northern League folded in 1970, and the original Duluth Superior Dukes went away also. The one last thing I wanted to mention is how they went from the Duluth Dukes to the Duluth Superior Dukes in 1950. In 1956, they merged with their cross river rivals, the Superior Blues, and that's how they became the Duluth Superior Dukes. They had that great cross-border rivalry going, but unfortunately, they're just not very big cities, and it was difficult to support two affiliated ball clubs that close together. So they went away in 1970, and unfortunately, Duluth was without professional or organized baseball for quite some time. But in 1993, the new Northern League, an independent circuit, brought baseball back to Duluth. They came back to Old Wade Stadium, which had been scouted out by the league's organizer, Miles Wolfe, who had owned the Durham Bulls. Oh. But in a story kind of reminiscent of current times, got tired of MLB's BS and sold out and decided to start up an independent circuit to do things the way he wanted to do things.
Right.
So he came up to Duluth and saw Wade Stadium and was just taken in by the old 1940s charm of the place. It was really run down. The bleacher floors were collapsing. The outfield lights didn't work, but they got it renovated in a couple of years and ready to play in 1993. There was a big local movement behind it. It's called Save the Wade, and there was a whole lot of energy and excitement behind bringing baseball back to Duluth, which is always a great thing to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. So
the Dukes opened in 1993 to good turnout, but unfortunately not a whole lot else good. They were kind of a hapless team.
Right.
They were finished at the bottom of their circuit. They didn't sell very much advertising. There was a screw up with some of their promotions, and they had to take down a bunch of their advertising signs. Their original mascot, Earl the Duke, who was a baseball-headed guy with a top hat and a monocle, reminiscent of their logo.
Yeah,
was top-heavy and unwieldy, and just didn't bring any energy to the park, and scared kids and fell over on people and stuff. I mean, it was just really a terrible scene. And their original owner sold out after one season to go out to California to try to start up an independent circuit out there. And a General Mills vice president picked up the team in 1994, tried to turn things around. Unfortunately, there was a lot more issues in 1994. They just didn't do terribly well. In 1996, the team broke even for the first time, record-wise, had a 500 record, and then in 1997 they had probably their most notable year.
Okay,
and it's notable for two reasons. One is that the Dukes actually won a championship. They won a championship with an overall losing record. Of course,
which could happen this year in Major League Baseball, so that's
it
fun.
Absolutely could. But the Northern League at that time had a split season, so even though the Dukes finished with a 39-44 record, they did win the second half in their division, so they were able to go to the playoffs and won their first title in 1997. They also had a mid-season transfer from the St. Paul Saints named Isla Borders. Now, Isla Borders was one of the first women to play in men's professional baseball, as I believe the first woman to play in men's professional baseball post-integration.
Okay.
And she didn't put up amazing stats, but contributed to their championship run. She ended up the season played in 8 games with a 7.56 ERA 6 strikeouts and 5 walks. So not amazing, but it's she made a contribution. Yeah, exactly. Isla would continue to play with the team for a couple more years. In 1998, she would record her first and only win, setting another milestone, becoming the first woman to be a starting pitcher in a men's professional baseball team or league, and record a win also. She finished the season with a 1-4 record. She played in 14 games, 8 of which she started. She finished 4, so she kind of split her time between starting and the bullpen. Had a 1-for-1 strikeout to walk ratio, so arguably an improvement there. And stayed with the team until the year 2000 when she was traded to the Madison Black Wolf. Her playing time just didn't hold up, and she'd requested to be transferred. And Madison was happy to bring her on. They were run by a woman executive also, so she continued to play in the Northern League for a few years. Also on that night,
Peaches would be proud. I love it.
Yeah, she really put up with a lot of adversity. Had to change in like improvised changing rooms and hallways and stuff.
Yeah.
But really went out there and put in a respectable record for somebody who hadn't gotten to play outside of college, really. So when you put it in that perspective, she didn't have organized minor league experience like a lot of the people playing in that league did, or even major league experience. It was pretty impressive. Also in 1998, the Dukes offense was led by one Ozzie Canseco, Jose Canseco's identical twin brother, who posted a 292 batting average and 10 home runs.
Not bad.
Yeah.
No needles.
Probably not. Who knows?
Don't know.
Probably can't afford those so much being an independent ball player.
Therein lies the challenge, yeah.
And the Dukes would win their second championship in the year 2000. This time with a 500 record. They went 43-43. They're tying their best mark, really. They never had a winning season.
Wow. Okay.
They did win second halves multiple times, but never had a winning season.
That is how it works, indie ball. So, are they still around? How did they end up? How did we end up losing the Dukes?
So, unfortunately, the Duluth Dukes were a victim of circumstance to a large extent. The teams that were close to them moved away, and it just made it so they weren't feasible anymore. In 1999, the Thunder Bay Whiskey Jacks, who were up the north shore of Lake Superior from them in Canada, moved down to Illinois and became the Schaumburg Flyers. And in 2001, Madison Black Wolf moved down to Lincoln, Nebraska to become the Salt Dogs, which is a team that still exists down there.
Right.
So unfortunately, 2 of the closest teams to Duluth were gone. It was just really hard to make them work economically anymore. And in 2003, the Dukes moved down to Kansas City to become the Kansas City T-Bones, which still exists now.
And now, on to close it out, the right-hander from Houston, Texas, James Christopher.
So that does wrap us up. Thanks to everybody for joining. September 11th is today, and it is, one of the most important days in American history. It is a day that shaped my life. My September 11th story is not as harrowing or tragic as my high school friend, Bill Hackett, who was in one of the towers and thankfully was late to work, like seriously late to work. But I was an E6 at the time, stationed in Germany, but at school in Oklahoma. And my wife was at our home in Germany. And when the planes hit lots of things happened for us. We weren't able to get a hold of each other, which was, of course, a big deal and very scary. But we were also being where I was and hanging out with my friends, some of whom were Green Berets, gone the next day. And our training got sped up and we were getting ready to go to war. Now, what I didn't realize then was my life would be effectively changed. But I just want to hope that from a baseball perspective, the stories of the Mets and Yankees playing and wearing, FDNY and NYPD hats and all of that stuff. And then the Yankees making the World Series, George W. Bush throwing out the first pitch, the story of Jeter telling him not to bounce it, all those things shows you what baseball means. And we need to get back there. But what I hope from anything is we remember what life was like on 9/12. And we remember what life was like when for a minute we were all Americans again and we put petty disagreements aside and we really were trying to be unified. And hopefully we can get back there again because we need to. I still believe that America is the best example of a country on the face of the earth. And for everybody who wants to say it's not, look at the people that are literally dying trying to get here. It matters. But we have to be our best selves. We have to put in the work. We have to remember, again, what it was like on September the 12th when we were one country. And hopefully we'll get back there again. So I hope everybody takes a second to keep the people who died in the crashes, who died in the towers, who died at the Pentagon, who died in the field in Pennsylvania, in your hearts, in your thoughts, and in your prayers. Keep our brothers and sisters who raised a hand and said, we're not going to let that happen again on American soil, and willingly went out to fight to stop that from happening again. Keep them in your thoughts and prayers because they're still fighting that fight. We will be back next week with some more Let's Get To. I hope everybody has a safe weekend. Stay sane. Try your best to just keep realizing that this too shall pass. One more day into this 2020 means we're one day closer to getting out of it. So again, stay safe, stay sane, and let's get to.